So, hey, welcome back to the Prison Wallets. Here's a weird thing. Me and Ray just recorded an episode that's not going to be our first episode back. Stay tuned, though. It'll be the next one. And we watched a movie that sucked, but we didn't want to come back with a bad movie. We want to come back with a good movie.
A banger.
So, Terrifier, I'll just tell you, I guess, all I know about this movie. I'd never heard of the first one or even the second one. I only heard of the third one because I'm still a big wrestling nerd and Chris Jericho was in it. And I guess you said he was in two as well?
Yeah, he was in two, briefly.
So he talked enough about it because, he plays it up like, hey, I'm in the number one movie or whatever. Like, even though he clearly is not a big part of it, doesn't fucking matter if Chris Jericho's in this movie or not. But that's how I heard of it. And then and I was like, oh, what is this? And I looked it up just enough to see that everybody loves these movies. They are just like super duper well regarded. And then when you mentioned to me that the first one is like 35 grand, I'm double interested because I love super low budget filmmaking. It's so awesome when somebody pulls off something for like a budget that like we could probably afford if we tried hard enough.
Right. So I actually stumbled across Terrifier on, I want to say Shudder, like what, fucking 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. I jump into a rabbit hole with everything. I learn everything I can. So actually, there was before Terrifier, Terrifier 2, and Terrifier 3. There was All Hallows Eve, which had the first appearance of Art the Clown, and then there was a standalone Terrifier movie, not Terrifier one that we all know, but like another. It's like a short movie. It's like less than an hour long, and it had a different person playing Art the Clown. So did All Hallows Eve. So David Howard Thornton is the Art the Clown that everyone knows now, and man, the guy is so fucking great. Like he was like a stand-in for like a guy on, I don't remember, it's like a kid's show anyway, and the guy was really expressive without saying anything in the show, heavily made up. Anyway, so Art the Clown himself is a really fun character. In the first movie, which is what we're going to do now, he's extremely just vicious for the point of being vicious. But in 2 and 3, clearly the characters come into itself and he's more fun, if that makes sense. He's just having, you can tell this character is having the time of its life. The director, Damien Leone, did the first movie for a budget of somewhere between 35 and 45 grand. The second one had a budget of like 250 grand, and the third one had like, I don't know, I think it was like a 2 million or $2.5 million budget. And these movies have been extremely profitable. Now, I don't give a shit about profitability. What I care about is that these movies are fun to watch, even though there are some really disgusting parts, which, I mean, that appeals to me. But, you know, they're just a good time. They're easy to watch. I mean, if you love horror especially, like, you're going to have a good time. I can't even overstate how much of a good time you can have with these movies if you like horror.
That's cool too. I mean, even just hearing about like the other stuff that came before Terrifier 1, it's that thing you always hear about of like the 10-year overnight success. Like it seems like somebody came out of nowhere, but they've been grinding forever. And even that you mentioned, like, I'm not surprised that the first movie had such a small budget because you're just starting out, and how do you get a bigger budget? I'm surprised though to hear that the second one still had such a small budget. That is a small fucking budget.
Yeah.
So it's just double sort of impressive that this guy, not only was he grinding to get to the first one, he still was kind of grinding all the way up to the third one, like talk about just like that slow climb up the ladder.
I mean, Damien Leone, the director, he definitely had a vision, and I'm not sure how many more Terrifiers we're going to get. I know there's one in production now, but there may be a fifth one as well. I know the next one is going to have the backstory of Art the Clown, and while I kind of want to know the backstory of Art the Clown and how he came to be, I kind of don't, because it kind of makes it so that there's that mystery, like this fucking clown just comes from out of nowhere and, kills people, and obviously really has a great time enjoying it. It's like a kid going to an amusement park, just having the time of his life. But Damien Leone, the director, not only did he direct the movies, but he came up with all the characters, wrote them, he did all the special effects, he did the editing, like he did everything for these movies. I think he had more people involved on part 3, but part 3 was a bigger sort of, I mean, part two didn't even get a wide release. You know, part one did not get hardly any release. I think it kind of went right to video, right to streaming. Two was it had a small release in theaters, and then when they saw how receptive people were to this movie, they then expanded it a little bit, and there was, you know, kind of a bigger presence, which, you know, led to part three being so big. Like, you know, it was in every movie theater, whereas part two wasn't, and part one didn't get any theater at all, hardly.
And that is so cool too, because like horror is such an awesome genre for that. Where in some ways it's like our next episode that's going to come out is about a crappy, boring, low budget horror movie that, you know, it's kind of like let's just make a horror movie because that's a market that always wants a new movie. It's like in some ways an easier market to get into, but once you're in it, like the cream will still rise to the top. You can still show that you're a good filmmaker and you can still build up and become famous through horror. It's just cool. I like too, even just because I didn't even know that was the name of the character, but there's that there, like, I know nothing, but just that there is like, that's so important in horror history also is like famous characters. It's just neat for there to be a new one, you know, because that doesn't happen every day.
No, I mean, it's sort of like, you know, Scream, for instance. You have the ghost face character, and it took Scream three movies before people knew Ghostface as a horror movie icon name. Art the Clown did that within two movies, like, you know, which, I mean, doesn't sound like a lot, but, you know, he's a mainstay now. Like, there's no denying that this character is, you know, a top name. He's probably even more popular than Pennywise the Clown at this point.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. This is making me think of times that didn't happen, where like Bagul from Sinister. Like I thought that movie was cool as hell, but you could tell they tried. Like, oh, let's make another one. Let's try to make this character stick, and it's like, oh shit, we only got one movie in us. That doesn't even make sense to make more of these. So it just didn't, you know, the flame didn't catch on, type of thing.
I mean, they did make a second Sinister movie, but and I liked it, but it just was. I mean, you can't catch that lightning in a bottle more than once. Like sometimes, you know, especially in this case with Sinister, but Terrifier, like, I mean, people want more, and they're getting more, and like the licensing and the merchandise and all that shit. Like it's out there and people want it and it's selling. So this is why we're seeing more and more of this character. As an aside, I met David Howard Thornton at a convention, and super nice guy, just super friendly. He took the time, even though he had a big lineup, to, like, you know, answer a few questions for me and, you know, bullshit for a few minutes. And, you know, he was very gracious, and it was a very pleasant experience. I have all the Terrifier movies digitally. I've got all three Terrifier movies on Blu-ray and on 4K. Like, I think I have a problem.
It's neat too, where it is like it's a sign. I think not to, and it's weird, I guess, just to focus this on me, but a sign that like a franchise has made it that I heard of it, even if it's just through Chris Jericho on wrestling. Like just that I knew what it was. Like when you brought it up or you showed it to me on your shelf, and I was like, oh, I've heard of that. Like that doesn't sound like much, but that's when you know a franchise fucking made it. That some random guy who's not paying attention knows what it is. So good job, Terrifier.
I mean, look. I mean, going from part one to part two. Part two had like some notable cameos in it. Like it had Chris Jericho, the wrestler. It also had Felissa Rose, who was in Sleepaway Camp. She was the Angela character in Sleepaway Camp as a child. And in the third one, I don't remember other than, oh wait, there's oh, I can't remember his name. Ron Howard's brother.
Oh, Clint Howard.
Clint Howard's in it. You've also got Chris Jericho again. I mean, briefly. He's only in part two and part three briefly. But anyway, the movie as a whole, like the movies as a whole, like as a series, very enjoyable. I recommend them to anybody who hasn't seen them. And since I haven't heard too many podcasts about this series, especially the first one, you know, maybe two and three, you know, they got a little bit more, I guess, traction as far as people having podcasts or episodes or mentioning these films. Part one doesn't get much love.
Nice. And yeah, I mean, I was not only because I heard Chris Jericho talk about it, but yeah, I'm just fascinated by budgets that low. That's because even like the budget of part two, I would consider that crazy low. So the budget of part one is crazy, crazy low. Like that is so stupid low. That's ridiculous.
You will be fantastically impressed, I assure you. And at the end of this one, like at the end of the movie, when we come back and we do our like closing, review slash closing thoughts, like I know you're gonna be fucking wowed.
Nice.
Welcome back to the program. If you're just tuning in, I'm sitting here live with the sole survivor of the Miles County Massacre, which occurred exactly 1 year ago today. I've worked on the show for many years, and I've never sat across from someone who has a story to tell quite like yours. Thank you again for taking the time to sit down and speak with me.
It's my pleasure.
Now, when we left off, we were talking about the moment you woke up from the coma. Do you remember your initial reaction when you first saw your face?
Yes.
Would you like to share that with us?
I wish I was dead.
Do you still feel that way?
See, that movie was fucking sweet. That was fucking awesome.
I told you, man.
I love too. I was just like it does feel like one of those things where, if you grew up watching a bunch of horror movies and you've seen a bunch of horror movies, it's like it's like the advanced course. Like, okay, we already know all the tropes. We already know all the stuff that's going to happen. So now let's just make everything go one step farther than you think it's going to go. And it just kept doing that over and over.
Yeah, the guy, I mean, the director, writer, Damien Leone, he definitely did something not only unique, but like something that sort of really pushed the bar beyond what everyone who watches these type of films is used to.
And that's where, I mean, maybe it's an inappropriate reaction, but man, this movie made me laugh so many times because it's just that laughter, not that it's funny, but the laughter because you didn't expect something. Like right from the start, when it just starts with the TV and the interview, and then they show the girl and her face is so fucked up. Like I just laughed because I'm like, that lady is really fucked up. you know? And then it just kept going from there. Like even just like at the pizza place when that might be my favorite shot in the whole movie. Just after he kills the second guy who had to clean the bathroom, and they just show that quick close-up of his smashed in face, but his little tongue is waggling and his teeth are all broken, and it's just like, that is so fucking gross. Like that is so good.
I mean, this was just really, I mean, this first Terrifier, like first official Terrifier movie was really just a collective bang up effort from everyone. Like they knocked it out of the goddamn park.
Yeah, and I think you were definitely right. As we were watching it, you were saying how the guy who plays Art is like, obviously the director is a big part as well, but I think you'd have a very hard time finding other people because in his own weird way, it's like it's like silent film actors or like mimes, like you got to be good at that. And that guy, you said it a couple times as we were watching it, but he's so expressive. You always get what's going on, and he's like so playful. Like I love how he just, everything has to be a little twist on. Like when he took the selfie with the girl who took the selfie with him after he had just hacked her in fucking half. Like, that's very fucking funny.
With a handsaw at that, like, I mean, it all sounds so ridiculous sometimes, explaining what happens in these types of movies. But, like, as over the top and crazy as some of it is, it's just like, it's done so well that, you can't not like these movies if you like horror. Like, you just can't. If anyone likes horror movies and they say they don't like Terrifier, I wouldn't trust their opinion. I just wouldn't.
I think, too, it's neat where it is, like, kind of heightened. I think that really worked because it obviously got kind of super spooky at the end, where it's like, oh, he's not really dead. Because it was somewhat realistic, like close to realistic, but if it had been fully realistic and then he came back to life, I'd be like, oh, that's a little weird. But they were kind of pushing it the whole time. Everything felt a little bit like he's a little too quick, he's a little too fast, he disappears, he comes back. He's always kind of aware of where everyone is in a good way, or even just when he hacked that lady in half. It was a little too easy. He feels somewhat supernatural the whole time, and I feel like that does make it easier to buy when something supernatural happens at the end.
Yeah, and I mean, the supernatural thing, I mean, in this one, you definitely don't really see the supernatural until, like, the very end. Number two has a lot of, it's like they just decided to build a mythology around the character and, other stuff that happens in part two that, sets it up to be more fantastical. Part three, it's lessened by a lot, but it's still there a little bit. So as much as I mean, I love the entire series of these three movies, and I'm sure I'll love the other one or ones that come after it. But like part two is probably my least favorite, but it's still so fucking great. Like, I mean, if you have to pick the worst of the best, like it's still fucking better than a lot of the stuff that's coming out now.
And visually, yeah, like the budget, I never would have guessed. I never would have guessed in a million years that it was that cheap because it actually looks better than a lot of movies look these days. Like I was thinking how there was this really annoying habit for, I mean, honestly, like 20 years of just putting a color over everything. Everything looks a little blue, everything looks a little green, everything looks a little orange. Where this movie, it had like muted colors except for the blood, but it was because that's the actual color that everything was. Like they didn't digitally put some kind of like it's such a especially with horror movies like oh we'll make everything scary by making everything blue and it's like yeah, everyone else did that already like stop it.
And with it being such a shoestring budget, they did so much with so little. Like I can't even say the way it was edited, the direction, the dialogue was like natural and like it felt like realistic conversations as opposed to like this forced dialogue. I don't know, man. Like I just think that this movie really sort of set a standard, you know, and you see a lot more horror coming out now that's a little bit more extreme like this or a little bit more graphically violent. Like it's not cutting away. Like you see a lot, you know, you'll see a killer come at someone with a knife and they might have cut them or whatever, but then it flashes away real quick and you don't see the extent of the damage for too long. But this really focuses on the aftermath of whatever violence happens.
Yeah, I was thinking that as we were watching it that 'cause I've heard that saying many times of like oh you know it's scarier if you don't see it. I was like yeah maybe but maybe it's also scary if you do see it. You really fucking see a smashed in fucking head.
And it's definitely more fun. It feels like, you know, with, I mean, we keep talking about the budget, but I mean, the budget doesn't even matter so much at this point. What matters is that it's showing you everything instead of like hiding some things and trying to leave something to your imagination. That's good in some cases, and it's good for some scenes, but it's not good for everything. Like when you see something like a decapitation in this movie, like I mentioned while we were watching it, I watched some of the like ISIS beheadings and some of the Colombian drug cartel, you know, where they dismember people for stealing from them and stuff like that. And one of the beheadings in particular in this movie looked very realistic, like exactly like what I saw in those real ISIS and cartel videos.
Isn't it creepy too? Because yeah, I've seen a beheading or two in my time, and it is. I mean, obviously, when Art cut that lady down the middle, that was maybe that was a little too fast. But I was surprised when you see a real beheading that it's like, man, we are soft little blood bags. Like it was, I couldn't believe how easy it is to cut someone's head off in real life. It's like I thought it would be a lot harder.
I mean, maybe that just goes to talk about the quality of that handsaw.
Yeah, it's fine craftsmanship. But yeah, I love to even you mentioned like the lighting while we were watching it, and I think that's true too because especially like the times, just like the eyes, Art's eyes when he looks like it's like a combination, I guess, of all the factors of like his creepy design, but also just the way the camera would be like a little bit above him, so he's kind of looking up from under. But then just the way the lighting makes his creepy ass angular face look so fucking scary. Like if I saw that as a kid I saw, you know, I saw Friday the 13th movies and I saw Ed 209 blow up, shoot people to death in RoboCop, or even just that scene in RoboCop where you know, he gets killed and then turned into RoboCop. When I look back, I'm like, I can't believe I watched that as a kid. That is a violent movie, but none of it really stuck with me. If I saw that movie as a kid, I think I would have a hard time with this fucking clown motherfucker. Like to me, he's not scary now as an adult, but as a kid, that would fuck me up.
Absolutely. And I mean, you got to give all the props in the world to David Howard Thornton for doing what he does with the Art character. I mean, the guy literally never utters a word through the entire series. He doesn't scream, he doesn't laugh, he doesn't cry, he doesn't say anything, not boo, not ouch, anything. but you can see, it's almost as if you can hear it just by his emotive sort of reactions to things, like getting stabbed in the back. He makes as if he's screaming, but no sound is coming out of his mouth.
And they really walk that line too of like that scene near the start in the pizza place where the drunk girls are hanging out waiting for pizza and he comes in and sits by them. It's mostly just his fingers are really gross and his teeth are mega gross. But other than that, it's kind of believable that, like, especially you're out on Halloween, everybody's drinking. This is just some weird guy that you just kind of got to deal with. He's not so outwardly terrifying that you would just go like, blah, You can still kind of be like, oh, he's just unpleasant, but he's just some guy. We can deal with this. And then it just gets worse and worse and worse. Like, he really did do it. And his big floppy shoes and his stupid little hat. Like, it's incredible how scary he was, considering how silly he is.
Just an amazing movie overall. Like, I mean, I don't like to throw around words like amazing or perfect or stuff like that for movies or characters very often. But this is one case where, while people, not everyone likes horror movies, not everyone likes Terrifier, but they are, for what they are perfect. I love the Terrifier movies. They're definitely the best series of horror movies to come out in, probably, like I said before, I would say since Scream. Scream was the last sort of new, unique, well, not really unique. I mean, wash, rinse, repeat slasher movie, but definitely for horror movies, they are something new and different that push the line, push the boundaries, and make insta fans out of people, which is why you see art everywhere on things like t-shirts, posters, drinking cups, so on and so forth.
And there is that like playfulness of people who've seen a lot of horror movies where like I was thinking with the brunette who dies in the middle of the movie where first off, I was like, oh, good, she actually is dead. She's not going to make it through all these multiple stabbings and getting shot once. She's whatever, But then he goes over and he gets the gun and he reloads it and he comes over and shoots her again. And that's where he does feel like the Joker, but the Joker as a horror thing, that he kept shooting her. Man, I think that's probably the one that made me laugh the most. I'm just like, you don't need to keep shooting the body, but it's just so, again, one of those, like, it takes it a step further than you expect, and it's just funny. It's just like, that's awesome.
And everyone else that sort of found their way into the path of art, it felt like it happened organically and naturally, and, like, not just to put a bunch of people in his way so that he could kill them. Like, they had a reason for going to where they went and for being in that space at that point. It wasn't just like all of a sudden a group of random teenagers floated into the building for no good reason. One girl had to pee. Great. She goes in the building, she pees, she meets the caretaker guy or the exterminator, whatever the hell he is, and her friend goes in to find her. Well, no, wait, Art brings her in too. Kidnaps her, brings her in. The guy ends up making a phone call to his boss. His boss shows up. Like, there's the one weird rando insane lady who's there, but like the body count for this is like what, less than 10 people for the entire movie, but every single one of them that died, when how they died was different and more extreme and an interesting type of kill, as opposed to the character having a signature weapon like a hook or a chainsaw or a machete or something simple like that. Art really has a full arsenal of weird things. Some of them are even handmade by himself, which you see at the beginning of the movie. So it keeps the flavor more interesting and palatable than, say, a movie where the characters, like as much as I love the Scream movies, he uses knives. That's what he uses. He doesn't use other things.
Yeah, that made me think of the around that same time, the non-clever movie that came out the same time as Scream, the I Know What You Did Last Summer guy. It's like, oh, he's kind of a fisherman or something. Like, talk about boring. Like, that did not stick in the public consciousness ever at all,
No, they made two of those, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, they're rebooting it. Like, they're rebooting I Know What You Did Last Summer. I don't give a fuck about I Know What You Did Last Summer. Like, whatever. It is what it is.
I love to just like here I'm trying to like justify why I laughed so many times at all this horrifying stuff that happened in that movie, but because it's like the unpredictability. Because they kind of say like that's what a joke is anyway, right? You just like the punchline is not what you expect someone to say, so then you laugh. And this movie, I never expected what was going to happen. Like even I did kind of presume toward the end. I'm like, okay, so the second sister, the final girl, she must be the one with the messed up face from the beginning. I kind of assumed that's where it was going. So then I was trying to figure out what was going to happen. I assumed like maybe acid in her face, and then they showed the rats, and I was like, is he going to tie her up and let rats chew her face off? I never could have guessed he was going to chew her face off. So even when I kind of knew what was going to happen, I didn't fucking know what was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, this movie's all over the place in terms of what happened and what could possibly happen, but the end result is still great. Like, there's no way that this movie could have been better than what it was for a first installment on such a tiny budget.
Yeah, that budget still blows my mind. That makes, and then we were talking about as we watched it that, yeah, if I was, not only was the blonde chick hot, she was like a good actress. Like as an obnoxious drunk chick, I found her very entertaining. I'm like, you're really doing a good job here. I mean, how much could they have possibly paid her to be tied up upside down and cut in half?
Naked.
Yeah, that's like whatever you got paid, lady. You should have got paid double. But even stuff like I liked even how the heightened stuff that is kind of a little bit too much is still sort of believable. Like when he had his tiny little bicycle, and you were like, "Where'd that come from?" And I was like, "I don't know. He did have a pretty big garbage bag. Maybe it was in his garbage bag." And then I looked at it, and I'm like, "Yeah, it's small enough." It could have fit in his garbage bag. Like even like he wasn't just pulling magical things out of thin air. He sort of was, but it was just believable enough. Like that's really interesting that it's right on that line of because also I think if it was fully believable, it is kind of less scary too. Like he needs to be a little bit too much for reality to truly be scary, but he wasn't just like, super magical.
Yeah, and the garbage bag, you'll also see that in part two.
Yeah, I wish I had a count or two of how many times I laughed. It's like, not, let me tell you, this came back to me. Inappropriate reactions. There's this movie called Happiness, came out way back in the 90s that I went to by accident. It was like there's this rapper named Saul Williams who did a movie, and I was going to go see his movie at the university in our hometown, but I got the weeks wrong. So I went to this movie Happiness instead. And there was this scene in that movie where there's this dad who is a pedophile who drugged one of his son's friends and raped the kid. And then there's this heartfelt scene where he has to explain to his son what he did, and his son's crying, and his son goes, "Would you ever do that to me, Daddy?" And he's like, "I don't know, son." And I laughed, and no one else in the whole packed student theater. This was also at a university, so everyone's extra, PC about everything. No one else laughed, and man, I felt like an asshole. But it's like, how are you taking this seriously? He's like, "I'm not sure, son. Maybe I would molest you." Like, it's ludicrous. Anyway, I tend to laugh at these things.
I also would have laughed. Like, I haven't seen Happiness, but had I been there with you, I would have laughed with you.
And it sucked. It was so boring. So yeah, when that happened, I don't know. I was just like, that's fucking funny. But I guess it wasn't. Sorry.
Fucking whiners.
Yeah. Or we were talking about a Serbian film. Like, yeah, like to me, a Serbian film is funny. I don't know. Like not ha funny, but like what the fuck funny. And yeah, so I guess that's it. That's what this movie was. This was what the fuck funny.
Yeah, and I mean, as many times as I watch it, like I never get bored. I never for a minute, am sort of taken out of it. Like it's so entertaining and so well done that it stands up on repeat viewings, which is why I've bought the entire series like 3 times.
Yeah, so our next episode, because we already recorded it earlier tonight, but I'm going to flip-flop them so we don't come back with this boring-ass movie. But I unfortunately convinced Ray to watch this movie Haunt Season because I followed the guy who made it on YouTube. But I just want to briefly bring it up because these two movies couldn't be more perfect counterparts. They're both very low-budget movies that kind of came out of nowhere that no one's particularly paying attention to. Like, this guy didn't have the Terrifier guy didn't have any advantages that the Haunt Season guy didn't have. They're both coming from the same place with the same, probably less of a budget. And Terrifier is like such an amazing example of like, even if you are just at the bottom of the film industry and you've just climbed your way in, you can knock it out of the fucking park. And then the other movie that you'll hear about next episode is just how to not do that, how to totally just squander this opportunity and do nothing interesting.
Haunt Season had zero excuse for being as bad as it did when you look at something like Terrifier. Like, it really didn't. Because Terrifier, I mean, it's everything a horror movie should be. Honestly, for as good as Terrifier is, you would think that this was like the second or third entry because it's so polished and so well done. I mean, it sort of has a gritty look to it a little bit because I presume their low budget meant they weren't using like super great cameras and stuff like that. But, you know, between the dialogue, the lighting, the special effects, like just everything, when it was all cut together and edited, like the product that you get at the end was excellent. Like, that's all there is to it. And Haunt Season, you know, this guy made like a whole bunch of like he made like a TV series on YouTube, and so he had all that experience, and it feels like he got all this experience and then decided to make a horror movie, not being a real horror fan, it seems. And, you know, when he started making it, he was like, fuck it. And it sucked because of it.
Yeah, or like, I don't know, maybe the mentality was like, you know, don't start off too crazy. Let's just sort of make it. Whereas the Terrifier guy was like, no, let's not start off, because I guess it's not his first thing, but let's just fucking, yeah, especially too nowadays with so many movies and so many options. Yeah, like I don't need you to go halfway. I want you to go all the way. And the Terrifier went all the way plus an extra step, and not just like one. Like at every scene, at every stage, there was always an extra thing that I would not have expected to happen. And man, that's just impressive as hell, and just like refreshing. It's like I never had that feeling of like, oh man, I've like sometimes you watch movies and you think like, man, I've watched a lot of movies in my life. Where this one, it's like makes you want to watch more movies in your life. I don't think we could kick things off much better than that. That is fucking just a good fucking movie, dude. Just a good ass movie. Did we have, again, it's been so long, did we have like a little sign off phrase or something? Didn't we have something?
Fuck you all.
Oh, yeah. Didn't we have something offensive we used to say? That was it.
Yeah, I think it was fuck you all or go fuck yourselves. I think it was fuck you all.
Something along those lines. Go fuck yourself. Yeah. Fuck off.
Fuck.